Greetings, Silas here, and I'm going to be reading an article here that a friend of mine posted. Shall be calling the friend YF, but adult mentality required. This is going to be on a topic matter that may trigger certain people, definitely trigger the algorithms. I'm going to be saying that S word, that means somebody choosing to take their own life, end their own life, and this might be a topic that is definitely sensitive for many people, that might trigger some negative feelings. And if you are someone who is experiencing this kind of thought and things like that, I really hope you are trying to get some assistance for that, and there's many sources that you can actually get help with this. And this is about specific in Switzerland, where that procedure is something that is legal. And this is about an invention of a Sarco Pod, which is now a 3D printed invention that makes that actual decision to do this really grave and unfortunate to the people who are specifically alive. And this is part of what I'm going to discuss in this. It's not a simple thing to think of. I don't think people do it lightly, and this is just a topic that gets people involved in it. So into that now. I'm recording this on December 9th of 2021, and this particular article is from the Daily Beast, which I shall be reading this article. I've seen it posted in other places, actually even mentioned this or drafted this in my Come See This Thing series, which is on my blog, rantathon.wordpress.com. And with that series, I kind of just take 3 things of interest and I kind of attach them together and then I post them. So there's one daily with those things. And then sometimes I'll add more like current affair things at the bottom. You want me snippets and find ways to connect it. But this is a topic that I have thought of for some time. And seeing this repeated over and over again, especially in the manner that YF posted it, made me want to expand on my thoughts on it. So I shall read the article for more context before getting into my thoughts about that. So here we go to the article, and this one is from the Daily Beast. The previous one I saw was from the Daily Mail, and I'm sure it's been posted in many other locations. If you are just around at this time when you listen to this, you've probably seen this being posted somewhere. So getting into the article now. So the title here is Switzerland Approves Assisted Suicide Capsule. Now, many of you are aware of how clickbait and things like this work, or you have noticed this in yourself, where there's many people who don't actually get into reading the article. What percentage of people actually see the headline and just take it from the headline? Then how many people actually go in to read the byline? How many people actually read past the first paragraph? I think that keeps reducing over and over again. If somebody sees it on social media posted, sees the headline, okay, that's the people who see that. Maybe 50% of those will actually click the article. Of those who click it, they'll read the byline in the first paragraph. The people that get past that is maybe 15%. So we do understand there's a certain process that people go through certain things to get to make certain decisions. Before they make certain decisions, even a decision as rather simple as just, will I read this article before having an opinion on it? There's different procedures to get to the end of the article. But if somebody is saying, oh, you're making a video about this, for me, I'll feel like, okay, before making a video about something, let me get to the end of the article. Even the Come See This Thing series, if I'm just doing that thing, sometimes I'll only go and read most of the article, at least skim the article to pull out a certain part that I'm trying to get other people to read, but I'm not making a big major decision on it. And I think keeping that in mind is something to keep in mind when you're thinking of this topic, which is a rather heavy topic that should not be taken lightly. Okay, so if you just read that article, people think, okay, approves assisted suicide capsule. If you leave it at there, somebody might just think, wait, they're just approving this capsule. What does that come to mind with you? I know with that article, they Come See This Thing posted. I posted that thing from the Suicide Booth in Futurama, which is a great show. And Fry, the main character, I think the primary character, his main protagonist of the show, meets Bender, who becomes his best friend for the first time, I think, in the Suicide Booth. And you just have people kind of lining up on the sidewalk in this future world and just entering. You pay like a certain 25 cents. You ask, like, do I want it painful or not? Like, what mode do I want to have it? And then the machine cleans itself. So some people might have that kind of idea of it, of that kind of sense, but is that what we're going to have with this? So I think this kind of leaves it out there. Now you read the byline here, and it says assisted suicide is legal in Switzerland, and this new 3D printed invention makes it even easier. Now, even from that already adds now some information. Okay, it's legal already. Now, this is just a tool being added. This is not like, okay, now suicide is legal because we've discovered this kind of Sarcopod. The Sarcopod was it's also okay. It would be remiss not to mention that it also says death pod there in quotation marks. I mean, you're trying to get people to click and things. I know there's some sensationalism in this, and I'm sure some people have called it a death pod. And okay, 3D printed invention, 3D printing, so cool. But this kind of now adds this to be modular with the 3D printing ability of it. Now this is something that can be spread around the world. That kind of adds something. You don't need some specific technicians in Switzerland are the only people who can build this, so these people are in high demand. It's like once you have the machine out there, then other people can do it. Maybe it can be leaked and then somebody else can take it for negative things. But you can do that with a gun. You can do that with pills. You can do that with other things where you can find other ways in order to do this. Unfortunately, when you're making this kind of decision in many cases. So that's what I have to say about that to start with. So let's just get into the article. And they say, listen here, maybe I should just find a recording thing and go. So I'll just try to read through it without giving any commentary and then give commentary at the end, because I scripted a short bit about that and I'll expand on that there. So getting into it. Switzerland has just legalized a new way to die by assisted suicide. The country's medical review board has authorized the use of the Sarco Suicide Pod, which is a 3D printed portable coffin-like capsule with windows that can be transported to a tranquil place for a person's final moments of life. Conventional assisted suicide methods have generally involved a chemical substance. Inventor Philip Nietzsche, I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to give commentary, but it's Nitschke. So it's Nietzsche. It's not Nietzsche. Because I'm thinking Nietzsche, the famous psychologist, philosopher, things like that. So I'm thinking that I'm being taken to say it in that kind of way. But I think it's Nietzsche. Nietzsche. Let me know if anyone knows what language this is. I think I'll ask my friend Stephen. He knows some of these more Germanic, Scandinavian type of European accents and things like that, or languages. Okay, so back to the reading. Inventor Philip Nietzsche of Exit International told the website swissinfo.ch that his death pod offers a different approach. We want to remove any kind of psychiatric review from the process and allow the individual to control the method themselves, he said. Our aim is to develop an artificial intelligence screening system to establish a person's mental capacity. Naturally, there is a lot of skepticism, especially on the part of psychiatrists. The pod can be activated from inside and can give the person intending to die various options for where they want to be for their final moments. The machine can be towed anywhere for the death, he said. It can be an idyllic outdoor setting or in the premises of an assisted suicide organization, for example. To qualify to use the pod, the person who wants to die must answer an online survey that is meant to prove whether they are making the decision of their own accord. If they pass, they will be told the location of the pod and given an access code. Once inside, the person intending to end their own life will have to answer pre-recorded questions and press a button that will start the process of flooding the interior with nitrogen, which will quickly reduce the oxygen levels inside from 21% to 1%. The person will get into the capsule and lie down, he said, adding, "It's very comfortable." He said the person will likely feel disoriented or euphoric. The whole thing takes about 30 seconds, he said. Death takes place through hypoxia and hypocampnia, oxygen and carbon dioxide deprivation, respectively. There is no panic, no choking. In 2020, about 1,300 people died by assisted suicide in Switzerland, almost all by ingesting liquid sodium pentobarbital, which puts a patient into a deep coma before killing them. Assisted suicide is also legal in the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Canada. The Sarco Suicide Pod is expected to be operational in 2022. The company has made 3 prototypes, but one was not aesthetically pleasing, so it will not be used, it says. The company has not yet announced how much it will cost to use the service. And then here it says, if you or a loved one are struggling with suicidal thoughts, please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. It's 8255, or contact the crisis text line by texting TALK to 741-741. And most of my listeners are in the United States of America, so I think these are the lines for there. And I shall try to leave links below. There's some international lines. Most countries that I know of, if you're living in a country that you can hear this, chances are there is some sort of probably several organizations that do provide some assistance for people who are contemplating, who are struggling with these thoughts, and that's just something that I think y'all should keep in mind. Okay, so that's the article. What do y'all think before I go into more about what I think about the topic and the article in specific? What do you think about this? A bit personal for me. I've had some experiences with some people who have it's tough to talk about, and I'm kind of thinking here there is a process to get into. I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about some of these things, but it is an emotional topic for a lot of people, and I can understand the thoughts and things that people would have into this. So I think I'll just read what I had kind of thought of and drafted and written, and I might insert some of the other thoughts that I have, or just add something at the end with this. But I personally have had some experience with it. I've not personally attempted myself, not really gotten to myself to the ideation on it. It's always been something that I've written and made a couple of other videos about the topic, where it's tough for me to imagine. I think whenever people make an action, they think this is the best action to do. Like, this is better than not doing this. So to get to the point where you have enough confidence, or at least enough confidence in continuing existence as it is worse than the unknown of what comes after that. It's something tough for me to really try to empathize and keep in my mind and think of, but I can realize that we know that many, many millions of people are dealing with this at this moment, and many take this choice and action in their lives to end their lives every year. So it's an issue that's there. It's not something that should be ignored. I think it's good that people are talking about it more. It's a tough topic, as I mentioned, adult mentality required with this topic. And it's not just adult mentality required. Now, that's the thing. I think with this, I don't think it would just be children allowed to do this. Yes, some people say, yes, a child can decide what gender they can decide to start changing their gender, take hormone blockers and things like this. And this, unfortunately, is also one of the groups that has a lot of issues that they deal with, and there's a higher suicide rate within the transsexual community in that situation. And then, okay, men in general commit suicide at a higher rate, but that's like older men. But then we talk about this thing. I'm sure there'll be certain qualifications where you can't also just be a child and do this. There's going to be a certain expectation or a certain age requirement before you can actually make this decision, because this is somebody making a decision as a full respected agent in whatever culture and society that they live in. I think that will be something to keep in mind. Okay, so let me just get to this. The person YF who posted this had mentioned that AI choosing who's sound of mind is a negative thing, and they also said that whoever did this, the Nietzsche, again, I'm really contemplating. I maybe not stop and ask Stephen first. But the Nietzsche, Philip Nietzsche over here, he was saying, okay, if somebody thinks this is a good idea, they should be put into the coffin, into the pot. They should try it. But I don't necessarily completely agree with that. But that's what they were saying. So let me say what I actually wrote about this. So this, to me, is something positive. And I think, like smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, overeating, etc., that are harmful to your body and life, things like those are harmful to your body and life. I still occasionally overeat, and I've stopped drinking and smoking some time back. I don't, however, think that the people who invented high carb and sugar-laden foods that appeal to some should be force-fed these foods. I don't think the people that run tobacco companies and sell these to different people and target different groups and things like that with our advertising campaigns should be forced to smoke a pack a day. And those that come up with new cocktails, new mixes, advertising things, comes up with new microbreweries or new types of wine or natural wines and things like this, find different ways to get alcohol into people. I don't think those people should be forced or should be required or asked to replace their water intake with that of alcohol, with the alcohol that they invented or they sell or they created. I don't think that's what should be done. And here, I think artificial intelligence is also an overused term. Now, they go in and they start talking about the specific sort of artificial intelligence, and it's not something that's completely agreed. Like you can see, they mentioned in the article that that is a process in it. Now, I haven't looked further into this to see if that's the only system, what other systems are set up in there, but they want to get to a point where it's actually at artificial intelligence. I feel the need to point this out. I've seen several people bring this up recently, talking about artificial intelligence in a disparaging kind of way, and I don't think they take the time to define the level of artificial intelligence that will be actually required to do that. If you're just having some kind of questionnaire where you're just hitting certain topics and certain points that have to be answered in a certain way in order for somebody to actually achieve a certain confidence that this person is of sound mind, whatever sort of program and figures being used in that, I think, have they been found to actually, like, I think at this moment, that's why it's not just this supposed artificial intelligence system, which is more of a marketing type of thing. See, this person was writing is talking about the aesthetics of the actual thing. So there is a marketing aspect of this. So I think that person also understands, like, AI is kind of short code for something that people kind of understand, which I don't necessarily consider that we're even close to actually something that I would actually consider to be artificial intelligence. But that term is used as marketing and also used to disparage certain advancements in technology or certain uses of certain things. So has this system, once this system, you can find and test out, okay, this system, we're using this system, we're testing out 20 or 200 or 2,000 or 20,000, however many thousand people you want to test, and say, okay, we're going to test this out compared to human beings asking these same questions. Are we confident that this system is actually at a lower accuracy of finding out who, by answering or doing these kind of questions, was of sane mind versus the actual humans, versus actual regular therapists and psychologists? Because the therapists and psychologists, they likely use a base set of questions, criteria, and answers to determine the soundness of mind that is similar to what can be done by just a computer, by just answering this kind of thing before you actually get it. Now, part of why AI is normally taken as something that, oh, that's a negative thing, this is going to, they're trying to replace humans, this is something that I see, they're trying to replace humans with robots and AI. No matter how advanced certain things become, I think there will always be a demand and an extra aspect of having that in-person interaction. And yes, there might be a time, there already are kind of technologies that can tell certain micro expressions and things like that humans only subconsciously understand. And when you talk about this, and as it was mentioned in there, psychiatrists and probably therapists and some people are kind of objecting to this on the professional aspect. And I do understand there's certain things that at this moment, right now, a good therapist, a good psychiatrist will pick up things that no computer is going to be able to pick up anytime soon. But we're not saying this is just, at least I don't think they're saying that this is simply just this process. It's simply just the machine and we're cutting out any other human aspect of it. So there's always going to be a desire and need and importance of that. At least not for the foreseeable future, there's going to be that. And I think even for just always, there'll be some people and a demand for having that human interaction. But when you come to that point, is every single psychiatrist the best kind of friend to have? Do they pick up the relationships around them? Do they just all know? Therapists and psychiatrists, are those the best people to be friends with? Do those friend circles just have the most stable and happy people because they just catch these things at all times? And even the people who go to psychiatrists and seek therapy and things like that, they don't always have the best outcomes because it's also a scaling level of who is good and who is bad. Just how with programming, there's good programs, there's bad programs. So there's different levels of these things. When somebody's on the job, they might pick up certain things. The computer and the program is technically always on the job. They're never going to forget that, oh, when we've done these studies from thousands of humans asking these questions over thousands of years, a therapist or a psychiatrist for various reasons might have a slip up and miss something, miss asking a certain point, a certain question that they base their expertise, they base their judgments off of, but technically a computer or a program would be able to ask those questions and things out at all times. And as I've mentioned, as I'll probably mention again later on, they can still have a human quotient in this. I don't think this is at the point yet where they're saying we're taking humans out of the entire process whatsoever. They might even employ psychologists and therapists at that end to try and see, is this person being deceptive with this? Okay, we're not going to approve this person. There's many procedures to actually do that. How is this actually done in the court system, both in Switzerland and wherever you are? What procedure is actually done to say, okay, this person is of sane mind in order to actually be tried? We can say, okay, this person was sane during the actions. When they did these actions, that's why we're going to charge them with this sort of crime versus a crime where maybe they lost their mind at this time. They don't necessarily use artificial intelligence in any artificial AI type of thing in that kind of sense, but there is a procedure, and how accurate are they in that? So my comfort with this process depends entirely on how significant the amount of time to establish if the person making this decision wants to do this. Many that seek to commit suicide first make an attempt to let someone know what they're doing. There are often signals before that, unfortunately, people don't notice, or it's an unfortunate type of thing. But sometimes when they have the notes or the explicit intent that that's what they're going to do, sometimes that often comes way too late. It comes too late to actually have anyone try to stop or intervene in that attempt. And with this procedure, you can just have you can have it at the location. I mean, it has a procedure in there where it says, okay, you're supposed to do this questionnaire. I don't know if there's a requirement ahead of time for the person to have been in some kind of therapy and sought some kind of human interaction and things like that before. You can see they're moving. And that's the thing that I'm now a bit iffy on. How good would the AI have to be before it gets to the point where there's no humans involved in this procedure? What's the qualification? I don't think it's just like opening up an application and downloading the Sarco Pod app randomly and just signing up and like, okay, I had a breakup. I'm just going to download the Sarco Pod app as I'm walking home from this dinner where somebody broke up with me, and I'm going to download the app. I'm going to just take a photo of myself, apply, and then by the time I get to the park by my home, I'm going to have a Sarco Pod there. I doubt it's anywhere close to that level, and the amount of artificial intelligence I would think for it to be at that level, I think that artificial intelligence would be at the point where it's like, really, dude, you just broke up with this. Is this enough? There will be something else in that situation before it gets to that point. That's my general estimation of what I think artificial intelligence will be, what I think a country as sensible as Switzerland appears to be would actually have to have, and these other countries, I think there will be certain requirements before you get to that point. I don't know if it's just simply like downloading an app or having some kind of impulse buy or something. That is a horrific situation to look forward to, but I really doubt it is going to be in that kind of situation. So in this case, it reduces the actual chance of having the negative effect of being a euthanasiast piling up on someone like it has with the few abortionists. And in this one, I have a separate series about this where I was just trying to talk about the issue I see with that. That's another major decision for many people. And part of the people who argue on one side or the other, on the pro-choice, which has now been changed into abortion rights, because again, another marketing thing, when pro-choice coming in with the relating to the current pandemic, the current pestilence of unnamed origin, people start saying, okay, pro-choice, it's pro-choice, my body, my choice. So they're like, we have to shift off of that and go to abortion rights. With that situation, some people have come to say that, some of the people who have committed these have come to a change of mind, which I think is the primary difference in people who are in support of full access and opening access to this and the people who want to prevent it. The difference of, is it ending a life? Some people think it's about just one life, the birthing person's body, the birthing person's life. Some people think it's about at least two lives. And that's why for most people who are against it, they have a procedure. Most people who are against it are not. There's some people who will be completely against morning after pills, for example. But most people who are against it will say at a certain point, we recognize it as another life and you are making a choice over another life. So we don't want you to be able to do that. You've chosen in most of these cases to actually get into the situation where you are hosting another life form, that you are a kind of a birthing person, you're a gestopod, of sorts, you're a human gestopod gestating another life in there. So you have the general responsibility in that situation to kind of at least carry on that life to the point where that life can exist outside without you. And at that point, most of the people are completely okay with a way of just like giving out children for adoption immediately after birth. This is something that is common in most Western nations. In most places, you can kind of do this kind of situation. But some of the practitioners of this have come out and said, I've seen a few cases where they said, okay, I didn't realize, like I had one mentality on what it was. I was defining this as one situation. Problems occur not because of what X is, because of how we define X. And then now I define that as two lives. Whereas I didn't see it as a life before, and then now they get that weight of their decisions or their life it comes down on them, and sometimes it can be a troubling experience for some of them. And I think with this process as well, some of these Planned Parenthood in the United States of America, some of these family planning kind of institutions also provide a lot of services to give guidance. And I think that's the kind of things to prevent even coming to this decision is a better thing than how do we actually do this decision. And now when people say, okay, now, yes, we prefer people don't actually have to make this decision. But if they have to make this decision, we want a safe way for people to do this. We want a protected way, a clean way, a way that can actually be managed in a humane sort of way in order to do this rather unfortunate and horrible kind of action that some people might say unfortunate, avoidable, preferably avoidable situation. But if it comes to that point, let's kind of get a way to do that. And I think the Sarcopod is in that same kind of venue. When I'm talking about the gestopod here, that's some of the things people say, oh, you're reducing a woman to this. I personally think it's one of the things, what more can you do? So many people achieve certain things. A woman or some people say, look, I'm a strong, independent woman, I've achieved X, Y, Z, I've built ABC, or men will talk about these things. What is a greater thing to do than create a life? So I'm not coming at this with a devaluation of life. It's just the definition of what can a life do. Because some people say if you have certain limitations, if as a woman I'm limited by society, then you're reducing my quality of life. So they'll say this is not a life I want to live. This is something I need to fight for. This is something I need to release myself from this kind of constriction. So people understand that aspect. I think that's something that we can all agree on. Now, a life, we understand independent lives. That's another thing that I think most people on either side of this discussion or people in the middle will also agree on certain aspects, especially most of the people who are listening to this are going to be the United States of America. Now, with some Americans on this topic, I don't really understand the Americans' relationship with their pets, specifically dogs and cats. A lot of people have a very strong relationship with them. They understand these are independent lives. But at the same point, many of these similar Americans are completely okay with the act of euthanasia when it comes to animals who cannot necessarily voice certain pains and issues that they may have. They put the animals down. And yes, I do understand they also spay and neuter pets in some cases, which I personally, in my estimation, am thinking if you get an animal and it's a full animal, you should let the animal be in and of itself and adjust around the spaying and the neutering. But for some people, they have different specifications that say to be in this life, they're going to live this kind of limited way. So that's something that I think some people will understand in that sense, to say we can actually control the quality of life, the standard of life of other beings that we consider independent. And then now when you apply that to the unborn, to what's growing in a woman, to that amazing process that males cannot have, males of all species cannot have. It's definitive biological. But that process, so in that process, when is it a point? Some people might be okay with euthanizing animals, but they think, okay, we can't do this to unborn children because they hold them on a different standard. So it's not the action of ending lives that is necessarily an issue. It's who's choosing to do this, who should be protected from this. And again, humans are one of the many animals on Earth, on this planet that we live on, and certain animals will have a situation where when they get old enough, they'll kind of just go away from society and the rest of the pack or the rest of the group. And that's their functionality. If they had an ability to have retirement homes, they might have the retirement homes and go to that, where they have that community and have the civilization that gives them that privilege, that opportunity. Maybe if they had access to a sarcopod, an animal in that same situation that's communicated to would actually take that choice. Now, when it comes to the choice here we're talking about with the rights, when it comes to ending somebody's pregnancy, somebody says, okay, well, if you haven't experienced this, if you can't have the ability to have a child, you shouldn't speak on this. I don't necessarily completely agree with that. What about the women with menopause? Or people who just don't want to have kids? I think people could have opinions, but it doesn't mean you go to prevent somebody's actual chosen actions. I think that's a key thing with this thing. Again, here we're talking about something that things people will probably do regardless. So if you're going to do it, how can you get into a situation where it's done in as humane a way as possible? And if that is a kind of reasoning that you want to say, people can say, oh, we've all been born, so we can have some opportunity. We've all not experienced this, because most of us, 99.99999% of us, hadn't had an attempt that we actually survived. Now, when it comes to this, who would be the most frequent user of this sarcopod? Maybe people with extreme pain. So you could say maybe it's limited to only people who've experienced extreme pain should be the ones to talk about this, if it's legal or not. And it's going to be a lot of old people. Should somebody say, oh, it's only people who've experienced their older relatives passing away? Is somebody who can speak on this? Who hasn't experienced that? Who has? It's a tough situation, but these are things to keep in mind when we're discussing these sarcopods. Now, I don't know if euthanasia is as widespread. It's definitely not as widespread as the practice of choosing to end one's gestation. So I don't know if any doctors or euthanasists, I don't know what the actual term, I just use euthanasists for that. And I don't know how many doctors or people who have been involved in that get to the point where they kind of, oh man, like I realize. But I think in that sense, you're like, this is a human being who has made this decision. I'm giving them an actual decision to do something. If somebody's like, wants to amputate their arm, yes, you're not ending their life, but should we stop people who are willing to amputate body parts? I don't necessarily think so. I think they should be allowed to do that as long as I would be more comfortable with a certain amount of qualification before you get to that point. One thing that would be interesting to see is what was the actual numbers. Were they keeping statistics before it was legal of the amounts of suicides in the country, and what happened with those statistics after they started having the legal suicides and the entire process, the entire infrastructure to have this process go? What was the thing? And who are the people that are attracted to this kind of things? You know, some people might say, okay, with this one, euthanasia, maybe it might currently attract or be a fit for sociopaths or other people able to detach that human element from it. But you can already see in certain fields, certain like emergency room doctors and triage doctors, like these kind of people have to have some kind of ability to detach themselves. Somebody comes in, they have a broken leg or they have some gaping wound or something like that. You have to be able to detach yourself and say, okay, this is kind of just the human machine that I'm, a biological machine that I'm working and trying to fix. You look at it almost like a car, because in some cases, if you're looking at it and you're empathizing with the person's feeling the person might be going through, what's this person's background and things like that, that could actually make you worse at fixing that body at that time. So there's certain fields that attract certain mentalities, and this might be a useful field to attract certain people in a certain way to have this field where you have that. And I think in general for the person who's actually making the decision, this is something that happens anywhere. I think with this, it will reduce the amount of people that attempt and then fail to or live in a worse conditions, possibly attempting again in some more gruesome way. At least that's in some other countries. But when you have this legal, as I mentioned, for most of the legal people, they have this procedure of taking this actual, what was it, the Bibritol thing? Forgetting the name of it. I've heard that name before. And yeah, I mean, I've like as I mentioned, I've talked about and thought about this topic before. And that they normally take that liquid and then it takes them out in that method. So this is just another method in order to do that. And this might just remove, because even in that case, I guess you're still not involving somebody. Somebody hands you hands you that liquid, and then the person ingests that liquid on their own. Unless somebody's a paraplegic, then there's probably some kind of qualifications in order to assist that person to take that pill. You can have some kind of way, maybe they blink their eyes and then it time releases some kind of capsule or something. So there is some procedure in order to have that. So now, if you're okay with just the general idea of it, what's the difference if it's a pod versus it being this fluid, this pill, or this other means. I think for most people, it might be the procedure to actually enter into it. That might be the kind of decision that people are kind of wondering about it. So people are already choosing that. That's something that's already being done. And so I imagine the same standards are ready for the way it is, are also being involved somehow to even access that initial app or that initial questionnaire of the Sarco Pod before it actually gets sent to you. And then when it gets sent to you, even when you're in the Sarco Pod, again, there's another questionnaire once you're in the pod, and I think you can also release after that, and that's just something to keep in mind. So in addition, who knows, the inventor may eventually choose to use this in his advanced age, or if they find themselves in a sort of condition where they think they won't recover from this, and it's or has little chance of improving, some kind of chronic thing. That could be part of why they made this. Maybe they personally knew somebody that actually went through the procedure or things like that, or had desired to, or had committed in a different way earlier on. That could be something that's been on their mind. For me, it's hard to relate. And as I mentioned before, I've limited experience with people who said this. It's been some people who've influenced my life. One of them still does. One of them who unfortunately I don't really know that much anymore, but they are still alive. And it was somebody the first time I truly actually thought about this topic heavily was back and that's part of why I'm thinking with the procedure of getting into this, was back in high school, and had a conversation with somebody I considered a friend, still consider them a friend now today. We haven't really had a falling out, but just moved apart and things like this. And they mentioned that they had attempted before. And I said, sorry. And then they said, why did you say sorry? And I was like, I don't know. It's kind of just what people say. And at that point, the person said, well, it wasn't your fault. It's not something that you did. It's more like I just felt like close enough to you at this time, that I knew you well enough at this time in order to share this with you. And then we talked about it a bit, but I kind of now wish we talked about it better. I think more. I think I was younger at the time. And I've had issues with that, and later on end up liking somebody who telling me that they had attempted sometimes before, and then had someone much closer in my life recently make that attempt, and luckily we were able to find that person, and then found out a lot more about issues that this individual had been having in the past that didn't know about, and now we can do a better job. And I think with many of these situations, I think most of the things holding people back with this, as it is with even regular deaths and accidents and things like this, as I mentioned, people don't know. Nobody has died and come back to tell us about this, despite the things that people might think. Some people might think with like near-death experiences and things like that, or resurrections of certain beings in their religious kind of way and things like that. I don't really subscribe to that, for like the zombie type of situation. I don't really subscribe to that, but I think for most of these, the sadness comes from the people who are left, because the person who's gone is gone. They're not in this current level of existence to debate and think and have that subjective experience that we know of is this a positive thing or a negative thing. So people who feel that they've kind of been left behind, or something they should have done, something more they should have done, and that's the same thing. Like the same thing I asked that first person was like, "What do you do?" And they said, "Okay, it's just that you're close enough for us to talk, so let's just talk. Let's just have this relationship. Just be there with the person." I think that is a positive thing to kind of be there. And unfortunately, I'm sure there's a few of you out there who've had that situation where something happened, somebody took their life, and you kind of looked after and you're like, oh wow, like how come I didn't see this, or oh how come they didn't come out and say something to me. So if you know someone in your life that you contemplate, or even if you don't contemplate, just ask how you doing, like how you really do, how you really doing. Like ask about how someone truly is feeling. There might be some things you're missing, you don't know about. Just reach out. I think it's a positive thing to do. So it's really hard, and I've had some downtimes. You know, I've had some limited interactions with people who have chronic physical conditions, or I know I've had some of my own mental issues, some that I'm still dealing with at some time. But I know there's people who've had objectively worse situations, or dealt with subjectively, I think in their comparison might have dealt with worse, that have had this ideation and have recovered from it. There's some people who their standard, their threshold for that level of, okay, I'm going to do this, might be lower than the things that I've dealt with. I mean, it might be higher or lower. So these are diverse things. One size is not going to fit all of this, but I think in most of these situations, we can get to the point where we can say, okay, this person's at a legal point. We probably know some 17, 16-year-olds that are a lot more, seem to make decisions in a lot better ways than some 50-year-olds. But with some certain things, we'll have that arbitrary line as a society, as a culture, where we say, okay, we agree that once you cross this point, we'll say, like, legally you're allowed to do, you're recognized in order to do this X, Y, Z in this kind of situation. Now, that point is normally there based off of a certain understanding we have on what it is to be an individual, an agent, somebody capable of making decisions over their own life. So what are the level of decisions? Why does some people get to 18 and, okay, this person can drink and get in a vehicle, which is a dangerous weapon, can possibly run over people, but we don't allow them to, we allow them to vote on what other people can do with other decisions that involve probably ending the lives of millions of people, but they personally can't drink and get into a vehicle by themselves to drive because they might be a danger to go out there and with their own decision making actually go out there and hit somebody physically. So you have those different kind of things, and I think that's where most of the actual issues that people might have with this is, what if it happens to somebody that I know? Maybe somebody I personally know will have easier access to this, that I will not be able to help them, is something that they might kind of think of to object to this. Somebody might kind of think of that more to object it, or they think the standard of it. But if you just accept people are allowed to make decisions over their own life, their own bodies, then I don't think you're really going to have that much of an issue with this actual situation. And, it's also harder to rationalize with somebody if they're in that kind of place, if they're in that point of chronic pain, or if they're in a situation where they're dealing with a mental issue. It is also harder to say, okay, is this person sane? Is this person in an actual level where this decision is going to be something that's actually valid? But if this process, for example, has that sort of artificial intelligence kind of working into it, I think that artificial intelligence, as I mentioned, will be able to kind of reason somebody out of it. But if the process heading towards even making the decision, even accessing this Sarco Pod already, as it is in the current assisted suicide system and structure that exists in Switzerland and these other places, also involves a kind of thing where you say, okay, we must notify a relative or friend before you do this. And there's maybe an added chance you must talk to a qualified therapist or take part of this program in order to actually make sure that we know that you understand what you're doing first. Then I think that's better. Because this is just another tool. This is just the means to that end. Because right now, if you just don't have some of these situations, people will still do these. People will still attempt these. People will still commit these without having this process that might even add this. So I'm against mandated. I'm against the mandated capital punishment, especially when it comes from the state. Because I think the state isn't fit enough to be an arbiter of guilt. And some of the functionaries, I think, qualify, as I mentioned, make decisions that destroy the lives of millions of people on a regular basis. They do this, and they're not actually going to be applicable. They're not going to be put subject to the standards of capital punishment. They wouldn't be damned to that. They wouldn't be applied to them because they're above that system. That's why I'm an anarchist. Anarchist doesn't mean no laws. It just means no leadership class that doesn't live by those laws. If there's laws of the land, everybody should kind of be subjected or should be subject to the application of these laws and holding these laws. But when it comes to something like the Sarco Pod, when it comes to that topic, some people are for capital punishment, some people are not. Some certain crimes, certain things people do are really horrific, where you're like, maybe we should do this. One of the things in specific I mentioned was with abusing children in some of the worst ways possible. Some of that leads to committing abuse again. Some of that is probably one of the primary causes of children, younger people deciding to take their lives as children or as older people once the issues come. So the people who do this, what do you think should be done to these people? I think there should be some form of chemical castration, at least for the repeat offenders. Now, there's other things like somebody who's like a repeat murderer. What do you do with someone who's a repeat murderer? I think one of the practical things to do this would be maybe jail this person in some kind of solitary confinement or a life sentence or something like that, or essentially a life sentence, but you just leave constant access or 24/7 access to something like a Sarco Pod. So you just say, okay, you're not allowed to deal. You've shown repeatedly that you're not somebody that can function with humanity in polite society, in a civilized place. We don't know what you're going to deal with this, but you can take this Sarco Pod. You can choose to go out if you want to. I think most people who even are against capital punishment, but understand certain criminals at a certain point still do need some punishment. That could be a sort of middle ground. And that's why I'm saying, in that sense, if it's the actual procedure of somebody choosing to take their own life, I don't think people are necessarily completely against that. I think it's the implications of what this Sarcopod may be used for in the means that this thing is used that most people would have an actual objection to. So that's been it for this reading of this. Let me know what you think about this. Did your mind change at all from when you first heard about this, from when I mentioned it at the start? Did some of the things that I mentioned make sense? Have you personally, unfortunately, dealt with some of these ideations and thoughts? And let me know. Let me just know what you think about this. As I mentioned, adult mentality required. I would. This is something that I think more of this is going to come. There's not going to be less of this. As we go into the future, this is going to expand to more countries, more locations, more places. And I think the problems will occur because of how we define the X rather than what the X is. And I think most people are comfortable and or understand enough that some people choose X. Now, once you've chosen X, what is the Y location that you're going to be able to do it? And what is the Z method that other people should be able to maybe talk to you or help you or involve in that kind of situation? Like, it's tough. It's a tough thing. It's not something that I think is just completely straightforward, but I think it's something that can be discussed. And to me, I've given you some of my reasons of why I think in this context of the Sarcopod, inventing it as a 3D printed thing is not necessarily a negative thing. In fact, I think it is a positive thing for, unfortunately, the few people who get to that point where they want to make the decision. I would rather we get into a situation where we reduce or remove any of the actual reasons that person ever needs to even have this ideation. I think peaceful parenting is one of the positive ways that I think will help do that. That's also increasing a lot more than this. And I think with many of these places that it's actually legal in, you'll still see, I think they are in places where there also is a level of more like peaceful parenting, like Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada. I don't think those places really in general are thought of children having very adverse childhoods in that sense. It might be certain things with, there may be certain situations, I mean, not just say that out of the blue, but some of these countries might also have a really, I think I double checked, I was checking this for something else. There's many countries that have the high happiness levels, also have high antidepressant usage. So those things to also keep in mind as well. So there are issues. There's quality of life things to be dealt with before you get this. But despite that, I know Switzerland is not that big of a country. 1,300 people died by assisted suicide. I don't know how many people died by their own suicide by themselves and doing that at home by themselves, or how many people were doing it before this is made available percentage-wise. These are numbers to kind of think of and just keep in mind. But yeah, that's it for now. Like, share, subscribe wherever you're reading this. Should be links to other content and things like that. I want to do more conversational type of things. This would be good for me to come and have this, but I also want to have these kind of topics as I head to creating and having more conversations, to have some days where I'm doing specific conversations with people about certain topics in the I Know Great People series. I'll be working on that a lot more. And then I'll have these kind of open times where we just sit down with some of the people that I've talked to in that series or other people who are in this hopeful community that I bring up in the Dying Alive kind of community, that we can actually come and talk about certain topics. Like if I make a video, if I've done anything on this channel, this content, I'm going to leave all this stuff up and be open to other people to talk. So turn this into just me having a monologue, talking one way, into some kind of conversation where we can kind of share ideas and things like that. So till next time, goodbye.